lymph, lymph. And I feel like I want to preface the conversation just by saying, you can tell us how long you've been doing this. Because and you'll have to give me the particulars. It's only been a few years that the American medical community has even recognized the lymph as an organ, and I feel like maybe people are just starting to pay attention. You can fill us in on the deets there, but I feel like just,
Yes,
yeah, grounding the conversation
yes.
in how long you've been doing this and why.
Yes, I have been studying the lymph system for 30 years. This year will be 30 years, long time. I know I'm not old, it's true. I was first introduced to an awareness about the lymphatic system in massage school, actually in 1993. And I was fascinated by the lymphatic system. Our teacher would teach us the physiology and biology of the lymphatic system, which, at the time I was, I was studying neuromuscular reprogramming and deep tissue and cranial sacral and reflexology and all different systems, polarity. But what I loved about the lymphatic system is it is your immune system. And what is really going on is it's an immune enhancing massage. And for me, as a student of lymphatic massage, I felt when I was on the table receiving the work, a deep, profound coming home, relaxation. It helped me with my acne. It helped me with my digestion and my menstrual cramps. And it really made me feel like that there was no more trauma in my body. And what I mean by that is I lost my mother to cancer when I was 13. So just that profound grief and loss that exists at a cellular level. So one day in the intermediate class, my teacher said, if you like this work, you can go on and get certified in lymphedema therapy because this work is really beneficial for cancer patients. Mm. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to do. So that's what I've been doing for 30 years.
Amazing. And you probably don't remember, but
I do remember.
You do, yes. Okay, it was years ago. And then we had this pandemic and I moved. And so, but I have actually been on your table and I've been on a lot of tables and I've worked with a lot of people, but yeah, it was a really special experience being on your table and just everything that you were able to employ was incredible, and it felt really well-rounded, and I definitely felt the 30 years of expertise there. And yeah, there are those moments when you work with lymph where it feels like it goes a lot deeper. And so I definitely felt that with you, where it was, it was very deep work. It was not just like, let's move some liquid, like let's depuff. There was the depth that was emotional.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for saying that. I do want to preface what you said about it feeling or being very deep to an awareness that it's actually not deep physically. It's a very light touch that you do feel at a deep level in the body, right?
Yeah, it's very etheric.
Yes, it's quite the opposite of deep tissue. And so whenever I'm talking to an audience about lymphatic massage, because one of the things I think it's important for people to understand is practitioners, they express lymphatic massage very differently. There's so many different ways that people say they do lymphatic massage, and they're not necessarily wrong. They're all just different lineages. And I think that's very important for somebody who is going to find a lymphatic practitioner to understand, because the way that I came into this practice is to work with cancer patients who have had compromised lymphatic systems, also for people with autoimmune issues or digestive issues, neurological issues. There's applications for the lineage that I study, the Vater method, for people who are recovering from colds and flus, because a lot of toxins get trapped in the connective tissue. But there's also, in the wellness beauty world now, a Brazilian lineage, where you see a lot of this on Instagram, these like mostly thin people, mostly thin stomachs getting even thinner and like kind of more defined after the Brazilian method of contouring, which can be actually a lot deeper work. So I just love for people to sort of understand the arc, the rainbow of different types of treatments that are available, because you might want something different at a different time in your life.
Yeah, thank you. That was actually one of our community questions that I would get to later, but we just kick it off with like, yeah, what is that stuff that is all over social media? And it's that Brazilian, very intense.
Yes, they work actually a lot deeper. So you have a superficial layer of your lymphatic system and a deeper layer of your lymph system. So the superficial layer of your lymph vessels, first of all, your lymph system is a vascular system. You know, a lot of us think of our vasculature as the blood vessel vasculature, right? That blood vessels and the blood capillaries that bring oxygen and nutrients to the cells. And they know that the heart pumps the blood, and what happens afterwards is there's sort of like a die-off of cellular waste that some of it gets reabsorbed in the bloodstream, but some of that hangs out in the interstitial fluid space. And it's the lymphatic system's job, is responsible for absorbing the excess waste, metabolic waste, excess proteins, hormones, fluids, cancer cells, immune cells, and they go on their own ride, if you will, through their own vasculature, the lymph capillaries and vessels that are very, very small, but twice as vast as the blood vasculature. And they get moved to the areas where you have lymph nodes, majority in the neck, the armpit, along the sternum, the abdomen, thighs, elbows, knees, a lot in the brain as well. And what your lymph system's drainage job is to filter out the waste. So that fluid gets reabsorbed, some of it as fuel to the venous system, and then to get filtered out through sometimes the kidneys and the liver. So I say all this to answer that question, to give people a basic understanding of, you have a superficial network and a deeper network. So a lot of times we're working at a horizontal level, gently, to coax that lymph fluid along its ride, along its journey to the lymph nodes, which is done at that superficial layer just under the skin before the muscle bed. When you're talking to somebody who really deals with the Brazilian contour method, they're working with a few modalities at once. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you're going to get good results. You're going to deal with excess fluid retention, water retention. And I work deeper in the gut, in the abdomen, because of the lymphatic organs in the gut that we can really help increase their motility, the peristalsis, to improve digestion. So, you know, some of it's just how people are working and for what reason. I hope that answers that question.
It does. And I feel like it's actually a great kickoff for what actually is the lymph. I feel like it's very buzzy, and there's this general understanding of lymph, immunity, yes, maybe you could even get to the place of like fascia, cellulite. I think that's evolving to people having like this understanding of like acne, autoimmune, lymph. Can you?
It's like I could talk for 3 hours. I actually just started a podcast called It's Your Lymph, where I interview guests when we get, real nerdy about the lymphatic system. And one of my guests is a lymphatic surgeon, and I just interviewed him. And we got really deep into like the science of lymph at that deeper level. And what I think is important to understand, I'm always asking doctors this, and I'm always trying to explain, why don't we know more about lymph? And why don't we learn about it in school, along with the circulatory system and the immune system and the digestive system? And also, why don't doctors say lymph when they're talking about your immune system? And I'm really trying to encourage the medical community to mention that because at the very top of this conversation, you said lymph as an organ. And what I love people to understand is you have a lymph vasculature and then you have lymphoid organs. Many of us don't know these organs are part of your lymph system. For instance, your tonsils, your adenoids, your thymus, your spleen, your appendix, the malt, the gall, the bone marrow. These are your lymphoid organs. We think of them in your immune system. But again, your immune system is the highway of your lymphatic system is the highway of the immune system. And these are called lymphoid organs because they are located in areas where there's a high bacterial content. And so a high concentration of lymphatic tissue is placed there to serve as your first line of defense against disease or to learn how to respond to an invader or a pathogen should it come into contact with it. So the body's just naturally, it's its natural intrinsic safeguard to health. So when we're talking about lymph and immunity, it's in your respiratory system, in your digestive system, your endocrine system. It was only in the past 12 years that we learned that there's lymph system in the brain called the glymphatic system that works with the cerebral spinal fluid when we sleep to clear out some of that amyloid plaque that's indicated in those neurodegenerative diseases such as MS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. So when you engage your lymphatic system, whether it's going to a practitioner, working at home, doing lymphatic self-massage, increasing movement, diet, exercise, sleep, healthy eating, these can all benefit that intrinsic cleansing components of your lymphatic system.
And so what are some signs of sluggishness that maybe are less obvious? I feel like the ones that people really get into are like, my face is puffy, I feel bloated. But beyond that.
So, okay, great question. First of all, I want people to understand that one of the jobs of your lymphatic system is to regulate your fluid balance in your body. So yes, feeling puffy, feeling bloated, feeling sluggish are signs that your lymph is sluggish. Your lymph doesn't have a central pump to move it the way the heart pumps the blood. It has an intrinsic little automotoricity pumps. So you want to increase your exercise. So maybe you're too sedentary and that's why you're feeling sluggish. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep, so the brain isn't getting cleared properly and you might experience brain fog. You talked about acne, right? So there's a lot of bacteria on the skin and the face, which also has to do with the foods we're eating, the products we're putting on our skin, sometimes the thoughts we're having, the stress. There's a major component about stress and cortisol, those hormones. One of the jobs of the lymph system is to absorb excess hormones in the gut. So you really can help your hormonal system by working with your lymphatic system. That's really important. But also someone who's prone to headaches, earaches, getting sick a lot, colds, frequent colds and flus, wounds that don't heal, trouble with athletic recovery. You know, a lot of times with acute injuries, inflammation comes to help heal the tissue. But if your inflammation stays for a prolonged period of time, that's a sign that your lymph is congested. What else? I wrote a whole book, as you showed on. Oh yeah, you have it.
So many people love this book, so I really, if this is interesting to you, obviously we'll have this chat that should give you something, but this is really like a recipe book, so that you can really get in the kitchen and not just theorize about it, but put it into
Thank you. That's what I really wanted was so people could really understand. And in there, I have a whole section on signs of lymphatic congestion that you might not realize are signs that, you know, lymphatic work can help with.
Okay. Can you give us what's the weirdest one?
The weirdest one. Ooh, it's a great question. Well, I don't know that it's weird, but there's a couple things. Eczema, I think people don't really fully relate that to the lymphatic system, But when you do think about your skin being the largest organ, 60% of what you put on your skin needs to get absorbed and filtered through your lymphatic system. So you might think of depuffing the face or for fine lines or wrinkles, which lymph massage can be very beneficial for that, but also certain rashes on the body. You know, what's not being processed through your lymphatic system. I've also worked with men who get really red and puffy around the armpits, which is where your axillary nodes are located that take a majority of the fluid from your upper torso, the breast, and the arm. And that really was from deodorant, antiperspirant, right? So I always tell people, do not put toxic antiperspirant or deodorant into those lymph nodes, into the arm. Or you might not even really need deodorant at all. I don't really wear it.
Oh, that's kind of like the, total side note, but as
I
some,
know.
we're like trained at the age of 13 to start wearing deodorant, then I feel like, everybody woke up to, oh, there's aluminum in there. But beyond,
Right.
like after your clean deodorant, go to no deodorant.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
takes a little while. You phase into it, but
Yes, my son is 13 and my husband was like, should we get him some deodorant? And I'm like, honey, haven't you been listening to me for the past like 18 years? Like, no, we are not getting him deodorant. He can shower after he exercises.
totally. You kind of hit on them, but wanted to just go a little deeper into, and again, like the theme of every talk I have with every doctor and expert is we kind of come back to these stress.
Mhm.
You kind of can't get away
Mhm.
from those things, but
Mhm.
can we go a little deeper into stress?
Yes. Yes. I love talking about stress. And I think one of the reasons why I do love talking about it is it can be so insidious, and you sometimes don't really know it's kind of like a slow creep. And I also try to tell people not to stress about the stress, but what are some mitigating measures that you can take on a daily basis without it being such a big job? And it can look so different, right? It can look like sleep. It can look like a walk in nature. It can look like taking yourself on a date, buying yourself flowers, lying on the couch watching a movie, massaging yourself, cooking yourself a nourishing meal. Really, where can you put more joy into your life? There's so much about our society here in the West that we really emphasize on producing and always being on, always being available, working so hard, instead of really like, how can you work less and have more joy? And I don't think people even realize that that's a stress mitigating method. And that is so beneficial for your overall health, because most chronic diseases are due to chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation comes from that stress cortisol hormone. So what are putting on music, singing, making a garden, what are the different things you can do every day to really help balance that stress in your life?
Yeah, it is incredible, that what's not built into our culture anymore. I mean, I had a moment, it was an early dinner with friends and everybody had children. It was, mostly women and children. And it was as simple as like, a potluck of like cut fruit and rice crack. Like nobody had to work that hard, and just sitting on a blanket and just that feeling of like, oh, like just feeling that in your
Yes.
immediately. And that as, one of the biggest wellness practices, to
Yes.
stated on
Yeah.
bio and the ozone and everything you could be doing. And it's like there's
Right.
not enough emphasis on like, how about some cut fruit on a blanket for like a
And
community?
and like you're mentioning a big one, which is community. there's been so much research on blue zones and longevity and, looking at people who longevity and how did they live a long time. And yes, they're talking about diet, and they're talking about exercise, they're talking about stress, but they also are in community, right? That connection. And I think in the last few years, as the pandemic shrunk our circle, hopefully you honed in and made some beautiful connections. But as we're coming out of that, we're sort of like realizing how important being with each other is to our stress levels and to our sense of joy and finding meaning and purpose in our lives. Those are major.
Yeah. Major and easy to accomplish if you schedule them and respect the necessity for it. And
yeah,
and like immediate
yes.
Yes. So what actually happens with stress and lymph? I'm envisioning in my mind when I think about stress and lymphatic flow, like I have a vision of like, ooh, that literally happens and things can't flow.
Right. So I think that there's a few things that you're envisioning, and I'm a very visual person too. I studied visualization and meditation when I was a child, when I was 11, when my mother was sick. And so I'm big on also encouraging people to visualize things also when I'm working or when people are working on themselves. That's why in my book, when I teach lymphatic self-care, I'll say, think about putting rainbows and moons and sunshine in your body, because that I want you to come to that visual, which is basically what you're explaining. So with the lymph system, I want you to think of the lymph system as the rivers of your body. And when we think about the rivers of our planet that are directing the flow of this lymph fluid to detoxify, to bring immune cells to help clear out the waste in the body, I want you to think about, there are certain tributaries and rivers that come across ease, and sometimes they come across obstacles. Sometimes there's land, sometimes there's rock, sometimes the moon has an effect on the tidal waves of our flow, right? So stress obviously is, as we mentioned, an inflammatory process. So sometimes the inflammation can block flow. Sometimes muscle aches, being out, can disrupt the flow. There's meridians in Chinese medicine where they feel like there's blockages in the qi that can block the flow. So I always think about, instead of trying to push the rocks and the hills away, how can we encourage the seaweed, that undulation of the fluid, to flow through whatever is potentially in the way? Sometimes I'll tell people, even if you're in a bad mood or if you're feeling blah, do your lymphatic self-massage. It will improve your mood. It will decrease your stress. I've had people write to me also, it helps their PTSD. It can help anxiety, because it's working also with your nervous system. The lymphatic massage strokes in the lineage that I studied, we go slowly. Your lymph is moving 6 to 12 times per minute. Okay, that's very slow. So sometimes on Instagram, you might see somebody working really fast and in circles. You won't really see me doing that. The exception might be in the gut, where we're working, again, the peristalsis and the motility of the organs in the gut to improve digestion. But we want to stay in that fluid state, that calm, slow, one direction state, because your lymph flows one way, back towards the heart, towards the venous system. We want to stay in that slow moving, undulating rhythm. What that also does is calms the nervous system, where healing occurs. So you're working on so many levels when you are receiving or doing lymphatic massage. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it also, I'm like, I'm ready to lie down and do this now.
Right?
Hearing you talk about it, I feel like I'm gonna, at some point, especially because we're on video here, and we'll talk people through just a daily practice that maybe we can.
Yes.
Face, but we'll come back, because if I do it now, I
Yes.
really.
Then we'll go, right. We'll all just go lie down or go for a walk in nature.
So we spoke about the glymph a little bit. I'm just so obsessed with Glymph, and feel like, it was probably 8 years ago, 7 years ago that I started to really pay attention to my lymph and do things to get it going.
What prompted you?
Sort of stumbled into it by accident, into something that worked. So I had been doing, reading about it and got it. And so I was doing all of this at home. I would do the bathing, I would do the rebounding, I would do certain breaths, I would do the dry brushing every day. And I have to say, none of that actually ever did anything for me. And so, and I got a bunch of our community also piped in and said, like, I'm doing the dry brushing and it's really not doing anything. And I, read so many times about how to do it. I think the first really big experience I had of opening up, flowing, releasing was actually in Panchakarma.
Because in Ayurvedic medicine, they've been talking about lymph for centuries.
Yeah. And so I didn't know exactly what was happening, but in hindsight, I can look back. And so I went to Kerala and did the very traditional, which is also really interesting. I went with this very Western mindset of like, I'm here and I want to get stuff done. And so like, let's go forward and do it. And, the shock of all shocks is that for 2 weeks, it's a lot of very light touch. It's a lot of oiling the skin and all the orifices. But the foundation of that, and really like the bulk of my time was spent with very light touch. And I was so annoyed.
Yeah, it can be a little confronting sometimes when you're expecting something else.
Weird. I can also look at like unstressing and like vata moving through my body and all of those feelings. But I think that really was my first very profound experience of relaxation, and lymphatic flow. And what that did for me was incredible. And it didn't last, because I hopped right back into my life of stress, not enough sleep, physical exercise 3 to 5 times a week. That was cortisol and so, I felt that shift of going back, and then it was finding my way back into like, hey, I just want to feel the way I felt when I was relaxed and well slept. And it didn't, it didn't require, it was such a nice time to see in my life that it was like sleeping, eating enough, having that lymphatic flow, and having relaxation did everything for me and more. And then hopping back into like, okay, I'm going back to my exercise. I'm going back to like cryo and acupuncture, kinesiology, and like just working so hard at it did not produce the results. And a big part of that was sleep. So
yes.
I now balance this thing of like, okay, well, I still live in this life. And like, there is a part of me that really does like to go hard. And so there is that like Westerner in me that I celebrate and enjoy.
Yes.
And so how do I do that? And then how do I also bring in that? And so I actually have found that lymphatic work is the thing that kind of makes that middle path possible.
I love this. There's so much I want to say about that. What a gorgeous story and a beautiful indoctrination, really, for you with lymph. There's so many things I want to touch on. Okay, so number one, because people did ask you about this and you mentioned it, some people say, they're doing dry brushing and they're doing this, and why don't they feel more? And my answer to that really is, are you massaging the lymph nodes? Probably not. Okay, so a lot of times people will go to somewhere and they think they're getting a lymphatic massage, or they'll get in a squeezy chamber thing, or they'll do their dry brushing or their gua sha, which is fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Those are all good for your lymphatic system, but I give a little description about the lymph system and inflammation. I'll talk about it like a dirty ring around your bathtub. Let's say you have a dirty ring around your bathtub and you want to clean it. I'll ask people, what's the first thing you're going to do? And most people will say, oh, they just get their cleanser and they'll put some water in the tub and they start clearing that, they start cleaning the ring. And I say, well, what happens at the drain site if you haven't cleared the hair out of the drain? Right? When you start cleaning that ring and you start pushing that water to the drain site, if you haven't cleared the drain, it's going to back up with what? That dirty, germy wastewater. So I would say to people who are listening, if you feel like you're doing your rebounding, you're doing your dry brushing, or you're doing your gua sha, and you're still sort of not feeling it, you know, I have videos on my Instagram, the lymphatic message, massage, and we're going to do it later. You know, massage the lymph nodes. Massage the lymph nodes at your neck, around your ears, at your neck, and your armpits, and your belly. You know, massage those lymph nodes as a way of, and before and after you do your rebounding, before and after you exercise, before and after you do your gua sha or your dry brushing. This is going to give you maximum systemic Slurpee. It's going to increase how much lymphatic circulation you can achieve. So that's number one. Number two, I love what you were talking about in Kerala. You know, I spent 5 months traveling in India and 3 months I took a year off and was in Nepal and Thailand. So I took a year off. And one of the things that I'm a big traveler, I love to travel. And one of the big things for me when I've traveled in my life, and mostly before I had kids, was this time, this massive unobligated time. And for you to really choose, again, back to joy, back to de-stress, things that are beneficial for you and for your body that we sometimes do on vacation, right? Like you'll go somewhere for a week and you'll do it and you'll get relaxed, then you come back and you jump back into your life. And this is why I do lymphatic massage, and why that and yoga and so many other things are so important to me. And having unobligated time, I think, is also really important in people's schedule. Is how can we bring a vacation vibe into part of our weekly lives? Might not be able to achieve it daily, unless, you know, sometimes I'll say to people, if you're at the end of the day lying on your couch watching Netflix, which a lot of people do, I don't fault that, massage your armpit. It's a good time to massage your armpits. Massage those axillary nodes. Massage your stomach when you're lying in bed at night. If you're in a car in traffic, you know, massage your lymph nodes. There's so many times throughout the day where you can take 3 minutes and it will alter your nervous system. It will increase lymph flow. It will reduce your stress. So what are these ways that we can have that home spa without it costing so much money? Not everybody has a lymphatic practitioner in their area. Not everybody can afford to see one. So what are these things, like you're saying, that can help you live your life? And sometimes, yeah, go for it. And bringing you back to homeostasis, bringing you back to balance and back to yourself. Those are just little things you can add throughout the week.
I love that. And we will get to your massage.
Yeah. We'll get there.
We'll get there. So the glymph and depression and brain fog, I feel like this is an area that is going to come out for the general public and be widely recognized. I feel like we're beginning to see inflammation and depression being taken very seriously. We're beginning to see things like that is the root cause of depression, and maybe it has nothing to do with serotonin. But I've seen some really interesting beginnings of research just around glymph and depression. Can you?
Yes. Yes, and also, so for people who aren't familiar with the glymphatic system, it was coined in 2012 by a Danish neuroscientist who was able to discover that there is a lymphatic system in the brain that works with the glial cells. That's why they coined it the glymphatic system, the glial cells and lymphatic system, and how it helps wash the waste, wash that plaque and the waste away in the brain when you sleep, which is why sleep is so important. And there have been more recent studies that do show brain inflammation, not just in neurodegenerative diseases, but also other mood disorders, like you're talking about depression and mood. And there was a recent study also that showed a decrease in brain inflammation when the deep cervical lymph nodes were activated with massage, lymphatic massage. So they saw a correlation on brain scans to a reduction in that brain inflammation just from massaging those cervical lymph nodes. So, I've been saying that.
How do we get our deep cervical lymph nodes? So this is kind of like, if we're going to the bathtub analogy, you would want sleep. So like sleep, like a decent 8 hours there, and sleep hygiene. I feel like people get that, but then you would want to daily maybe go into the deep cervical as your drain.
So, okay, so I want to sort of preface the word deep with, as I was saying in the beginning of the interview, right? You have a superficial lymph system and you have a deep lymph system, and you're sort of thinking of it like you're taking a road trip and your lymph nodes are like the little gas stations along the highway. And your lymph fluid goes through several gas stations before you get to Washington, let's say, right? So you have to make several stops. So when we're talking about the deeper cervical lymph nodes, it doesn't mean you need to massage deeper. It just means you're massaging the areas where your cervical lymph nodes are located. So massaging the neck, also massaging the head. I love massaging around the ears as well. So just massaging the head and neck will be beneficial. Doesn't mean you need to massage deeply.
My turtleneck is down, just to, like, for anyone tuning in with audio, the minute you started talking about the brain and deep cervical, like, my hands are here at my turtleneck, it's down. I'm like, Lisa, just tell me where it is. I'm ready to go now.
I mean, it's, and we will do it. I mean, it's the whole, what I like to call the shirt collar zone. So I'm wearing a white button down blouse, and it's like open around the chest. And so when you think about, like, find your collarbone and you sort of draw it out to the trapezius, you draw it like out to the side, you have your trapezius, and then if you draw it up to your ear, right, there's like this triangle, what I like to call the shirt collar zone. So that's where your cervical lymph nodes and the terminus, the right and left lymphatic duct that brings the fluid back to the venous system, is located. And I do love to say, there's a couple other things I wanted to mention, which is, whenever possible with lymphatic massage, you want to massage skin on skin. You do want to massage directly onto your skin. And one of the big lineage differences between the Vater method, let's say, of manual lymphatic drainage and the Ayurvedic model is we don't use a lot of oil. In fact, I rarely use oil when I'm massaging myself, except if I'm putting on my face oil in the mornings, then I might do my lymphatic massage around the face. And the reason is, going back to the other definition of the type of stroke, the lymphatic stroke is often horizontal in nature because we're working the horizontal lymph vessels that move in a one-way direction. They move the lymph fluid in one-way direction to the lymph nodes. Sort of like, imagine you're massaging the foam on your cappuccino, right? You're not going deep. You're in the fluid layer above the muscle bed, below the skin. And it's that.
I feel like I'm gonna highlight for people, like, you're massaging the foam on your cappuccino.
Yes, like if you ever played air hockey, right? How that puck just skims the surface. And the other thing is, if you're talking to a lot of moms out there, imagine your baby's crying, and you want to soothe your baby. You would like gently rub their back. You wouldn't like work vertically down into they don't really have a lot of musculature at that, right? They're just sort of like connective tissue, right? They're just like, right? So you would just rub their back so gently. that's the vibe of lymphatic massage. So the oil, the difference between the oil and working skin on skin without a ton of oil is we actually don't want to glide too much on the skin. You actually want to create a slight stretch of the skin, and then you release, and then you go again. If you've ever seen the way a caterpillar moves, everyone's going to like go in their garden and look at the caterpillars. They move segment by segment. They move segment by segment. And that's essentially what lymph is doing in those lymph vessels. The fluid is coming in, and there's a valve that sort of closes and keeps that fluid. And then it moves to the next segment and the next segment to prevent backflow, really. So when you're doing your massage strokes, right, you're like a caterpillar massaging the foam on your cappuccino.
Thank you for setting the vibe.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to quickly say before your next question, the other thing I quickly want to say is one of the things you said was, you know, daily, right? Doing this work daily. And I rarely tell people to do it daily. And the reason is I want to set someone up for success. It's so hard. Like I could brush my teeth daily. Like I could kind of get that in, right? But like if you're a new mom or you're working or you're busy, I don't want it to feel like a chore. I want it to feel like something you get to do and want to do. So I'll say 3 to 4 times a week is plenty. And guess what? Maybe you end up doing it 5 to 7. But if you only do it twice a week, you're still successful. So just setting up the stage to remind yourself to do it. And if you don't do it that day, that's okay. You'll do it the next day.
Yeah, there are those methods that I just don't do because I feel like I can't keep up enough, and so it's just overwhelming. You just don't do it all.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for that. What about autoimmunity?
Gosh, okay. I just really feel like there's so much autoimmunity happening. I think that there's more awareness about autoimmunity also. And this is the other thing about the lymphatic system and the immune system. So many people talk about boosting immunity. But what I like to say, and this is why I put it in the title of my book, the book of lymph self-care practices, to enhance immunity, health, and beauty. What we really want to do is how do we enhance our immunity? Because sometimes that looks like balancing, because somebody with an autoimmune issue, their immune system is not balanced, it might be hyperactive. And then there's so many different types of autoimmunity, right? So I love working with people with autoimmune issues because we look at how can we balance the system. You don't want to overwork the immune system. You also want to understand where are they at the moment? Are they in a flare or are they not in a flare? And so that's the other thing with this work. When you work in that Vata lineage slowly, that's how you will create that balance. That's why I always tell people, even when I'm doing a workshop in person, so many, we're just used to bigger, faster, more. People want to go faster and harder, but that can overactivate the nervous system and overactivate the lymphatic system. So that's why I really say it's like a dime worth of pressure, working slowly so it's nourishing, and that can really help balance your immune system and really benefit so many of the side effects of autoimmune problems, which can be inflammation, it can be brain fog, lethargy. This work is great for fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, right? Because of that inflammatory component, we can increase lymphatic circulation and how much lymph fluid you are recirculating through the body when you practice it. And I also would say to those people, practice less time as well, right? Where I might work on myself for 10, 15, 20 minutes, I would say start small, 3 to 5 minutes, see how you do. See what symptoms feel better immediately.
And so we will end with some instruction around things we can do at home. I'm gonna encourage everyone to get the book because this is your cookbook. But if somebody does want to combine, maybe it's like a quarterly splurge for them, that they do want to go see a practitioner. And you spoke about different lineages, but there is manual treatment, there are machines, there are, I've done like sonar wands, break up. What would you recommend? Do you think they all have?
Oh, I love that.
Where?
Yes, and there's the lymphatic cupping and lymphatic facials that are also great. So what I first would have somebody do is, what are your goals? Like, I have people who've written to me saying, oh, they want to lose some water weight before their wedding. And I think that might be a good time to see somebody who does the machines and endermology, because they really do focus on sort of like getting rid of that immediate water weight. But then, let's say you are somebody who gets a lot of colds frequently, recovering from long COVID, somebody who has digestive issues, or I get also a lot of people who are very sensitive to vibration. They can't handle a machine, or it's too stimulating for the nervous system. So then you want to seek out somebody with knowledge of the Vater method, right? And the people who do the Vater method, or the immune boosting, they say they do MLD, which is manual lymphatic drainage. And so look for the MLD. Somebody who's not trained in that can't say MLD. They can just say lymphatic drainage or body contouring, but it's really the people who can say MLD are the ones who are trained to work with cancer patients. So that's another area. If you are somebody who has cancer in your family, or if you've undergone lymph node removal, cancer treatment, radiation, chemotherapy, find a certified lymphedema therapist, CLT. They're trained in working with people who are at risk for getting lymphedema. So there's just such a wide variety. So I would just say, what are you looking for? And then I always say to people, look on their website and see how they describe themselves. And does that work? Are you intuitively drawn to that person? Trust yourself. You are looking at, are you vibing with somebody's frequency and their offering and the way they speak? And sometimes it takes trying a couple people to see what you like. And also it might change throughout the course of your life, working with different types of people. We all have different offerings. So don't be afraid to try different people, and you might want different things at different times.
Yeah. And I think, that's what I meant when I said that the experience of working with you was deep, in that, less of the superficial, moving water retention, and more of that deeper tapping into, tapping into the part of me that put autoimmunity into remission. And so knowing that I have to keep up certain things. And so there are some practices that really touch that place in me, where my body will recognize like, this is one of those things that's going to keep us in a really balanced place.
Thank you for saying that. A big reason why I don't use a machine, I could, but one of the main reasons I don't is what I want to do with my hands is mimic what your body is capable of doing on its own intrinsically, right? Like, for instance, we talked about this in the gut, the peristalsis, the motility of the organs that need their own movement to secrete and to absorb and to, do their work digestively, helping people really not be constipated and go to the bathroom. So what I want your body to do is to remember that. And then when you lay hands on yourself, you have the power to help your digestion. You have the power to help your sleep. You have the power to remind your body how to do these things. Sometimes with autoimmunity, the detoxification pathways have like a disturbance in the force, if you will. People with the MTHFR gene who have a harder time detoxifying, and they hold a lot of inflammation in the body. This work is so beneficial. So that's what I love to show people how to do with their hands. I have gone and gotten work on the machine. I love the microcurrent machine for facials. But just for me, as somebody who, I just love the hands. What I also love about working with my hands is I get instant feedback as to what is going on underneath the surface, right? What is that wellspring of the river of lymph doing? And I can feel when there's been a tissue quality change, when there's been a change in the river of fluid, and then I know I can move on. Sometimes I might want to stay in an area longer because it's got a little more obstacles. Right. So I just love that. And, touch is used in nearly every culture to heal. We just don't always think to use it on ourselves for that self-healing. So I'm so tactile that way. I think that's what I love about the hands.
And what do you feel? And granted, this is coming after 30 years.
Yeah, I know, right?
And how do you feel it on yourself, and how do you feel it on others? Is it more of like an energetic thing? Or are you physically feeling?
It's funny. I don't always lead with the energetic piece. I think because I'm so taken with the physiology and biology and science of the actual how lymph actually moves, as opposed to is it just it's not just an energy system, right? It's like a real biological system of your body. And so knowing that these strokes work on the physiological and biological system of your body, I love those. I love like the facts of that, the science of that like totally speaks to me. So what I'll do is I'll feel like what I feel is there puffiness? Is it hard? Does it kind of move with me? Is it viscous? Is it thick? It's not kind of like La Brea tar pits for those of us who've been around LA a long time, right? So it's not just like muddy and thick, although it can be. Or sometimes somebody has had dental work done and there might be some inflammation. Someone has had surgery, lots of inflammation. But just on a daily basis, sometimes someone has a lot of sinus pressure. You can feel that. You can feel that in the cheeks. Sometimes you don't even feel it until you're there. You will feel often an imbalance, right? If you're fighting a cold, sometimes you'll feel one of your lymph nodes underneath your chin swell up near your neck. The other thing I love, especially when I teach people to work in their breasts, is often people aren't used to touching their breasts unless they are looking for a lump, right? Something nefarious that nobody wants to find. So everyone's like touching their breast like in a scared manner. But what I want people to do is touch your breast, get to know your breast tissue. Get to know the fluctuations of the month. It can also be so beneficial for your breastfeeding. If you're going to do lymph massage in your breastfeeding, I would say feed so that you expel and then do your lymph movement, right? To help prevent mastitis, potentially. There's such an increase in rise in breast cancer. It's so hard to exercise the breasts, right? But can we just nurture the breasts and touch them, right? Move that fluid basin so that you are optimizing the release of excess waste in the body.
So these daily things we can do to that are not massage. So we talked about brushing, we talked about rebounding. I'd love to get your thoughts on infrared.
I love infrared.
Maybe it's weekly. We'll say weekly. Breath, hydration, sleep,
diet, stress, all of those things. So, I think for me that like I talked about earlier, massaging the lymph nodes is going to be the most impactful, beneficial thing you can do. Think about the bathtub analogy. So I do try to massage my lymph nodes I do try to do it 4 to 5 times a week. Sometimes I'll do it at a dinner party, right? We were talking about like excess. Like I'm not good with alcohol. I'm not good. Wine doesn't really agree with me, but sometimes I enjoy it at a dinner party. And I get a sore throat if I eat sugar. So I don't eat sugar, but sometimes I'll want a glass of wine and I'll just massage around my ears so that I don't get a sore throat while I'm drinking wine. If I'm out at a concert at the Hollywood Bowl, you'll see me massaging my armpit because I'm usually jumping around and my breasts are getting movement. Dancing is so great for the lymph system, but I'll be massaging my armpits. I don't care who sees me. Like, what do I care at my age? Like, I don't really care. Like, good. See me massaging my lymph. May that be the worst thing you see me doing. But yes, I love the infrared biomat. I have one. I love it. Not everybody can afford an infrared sauna in their house. You can go to an infrared sauna place. So that's great. Some of the things that I do want to mention, because the whole extreme temperature is really big in the wellness community now, right? Like the ice baths and the hot heat to shock the immune system really can be beneficial. But I get the people who it is way too shocking for their system. It is not necessarily for every single person. So sometimes extreme temperature, if somebody is at risk for getting lymphedema, can aggravate their lymphatic system. So it's sort of like sending the lymph vessels into shock. And so it's not, so I just don't like, it's so easy on social media to be like, oh, wait, should I be doing this? So-and-so is doing it and they look great. But like, you don't know what's going on beneath their rivers. So I just don't want somebody to feel like they have to be doing everything all the time. And what we were really talking about, and I love the cadence of this conversation, which really is about moderation. Mm-hmm. And that is what your lymph system responds to. It's like, you have your type A people who are like bigger, faster, harder, more, right? And then you have your like type B people, like, right? Like, come like chill on the couch and let me like rub your lymph. Like, you drop into the type B personality with you were even talking about going back to extreme exercise. There's studies that show that's not always so beneficial for your lymphatic system. Mm-hmm. How can you do it in moderation? I'm not saying not to exercise. Exercise is great. Swimming, hiking, dancing, yoga, Pilates, like rebounding. Even weight training is beneficial. One of the questions I know one of your listeners was asking about is cellulite, right? Cellulite is going to occur in like 80% of the women, that fatty deposits, and it's hereditary, and it's a lot of us have it. Weight training is actually so beneficial for helping reduce the appearance of cellulite. Lymphatic massage, working the inguinal nodes, anywhere you want to work to improve the appearance of your skin or any part of your body. That's why I always go back to the lymph nodes, because your lymph system is systemic. So often I'll tell people, okay, we're going to work on our face today. And they'll say their stomach is gurgling. They feel it. Their toes are tingling. That's because you're really activating the entire systemic system of your body when you are doing lymph massage. So what else can we be doing? Drinking plenty of water.
I'll notice that with, it'll sometimes be acupuncture, it'll be deep relaxation, it'll be, just different practices where I can actually hear the lymph in my stomach. So it's like a high-pitched noise, and it usually is coupled with some kind of parasympathetic, which is always like once you realize that, if you can tune into that about yourself, it's such a nice guidepost of like, your lymph is moving and it makes that sound in your stomach. And it's such a nice thing to clock.
I love that. Mine is a lower pitched. Mine is like the deeper gurgling. So I just want for anybody listening or watching that it doesn't have to be high pitched. It could be low pitched. What is that tone? But yeah, we used to always say in the lymphatic community, like if we're working on somebody and they burp or they pass gas or they're gurgling, like, yay, your lymph is moving. I wake up to people to text from people like with like poop emojis that they pooped well now and they're sleeping well now, and right, all of the systems of your body moving. That's like, I celebrate when my kids fart, you know, like so many people are like, hold that fart in. I mean, okay, sometimes for social graces you have to, but I'm like, let's celebrate, you know, these bodily functions that are important lymphatically.
Yeah, it's also the Ayurvedic thing where they say to never suppress a burp, never suppress a fart or a pee or a poo. One that they added in that I think is really beautiful is to never suppress crying either, tears or,
Yeah.
you know, that you don't want to block that or shut that movement down.
And it's a natural facial. When you cry, you're just like skin
Really
glows after.
cool.
I mean, I'm an ugly crier, but like after, when I'm done, just so good for the face.
Hey, I'm gonna start using that one. I love what you're saying about the heat and cold, the temperature extremes, because I actually find it to be too stressful for me.
Yes.
The extreme colds.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I have read the science, I believe it all, but for me and just where I am in life right now, that kind of extreme stress, I feel like it's just maybe I'm sustaining too much with my season of life and not actually looking for extreme stress in that way. And I don't walk away from that feeling um invigorated and like I've come back to homeostasis in this whole new way. I actually feel a little like rattled and traumatized by it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it is so important for people to hear. I don't think enough people say that. I don't think enough people hear it. So I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that, because it's true. I think we're just so used to saying, oh, this is the new fad, everybody should be doing it. And it isn't necessarily what everybody should be doing. Just, you know, I mean, I also feel sometimes that way about colonics. And I interviewed a gut microbiome brain specialist on my podcast, It's Your Lymph. And we were talking about colonics. And listen, they've been around for centuries. There are benefits to doing colonics, but some people get too dependent on colonics to do for them what their system should be doing naturally. Sometimes maybe it's an enema you need. Sometimes it's changing your diet. Sometimes doing a lymphatic abdominal massage. But just this culture of, we don't always need to be constantly in a detox.
Yeah.
Constantly shocking the system.
Yeah. I mean, I again, like as somebody that was like into colonics and like the master cleanse in the late 90s.
Master cleanse, right?
Oh, wow. All of those things that kind of go into that place, I've learned that's not where I'm at now, at least not in this season. There may be another season
Right.
where life just feels like too calm and I'm looking to, you know.
Or after, like, I think they're really beneficial after somebody has had COVID, or if they're dealing with long COVID, or if they after cancer treatment, like, or serious illness, like like you said, there's a season, there's a time for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think nice to just have that pause. And it also feels very lymph. And so I feel like you're really coming to us with that lymphatic energy of that, the subtlety and the intuition. And yeah, just the energetics of the body. And even with the infrared, I love it. It's a great tool. Sometimes it is not something that I want to use, and I can feel into like, that actually wouldn't be a good idea for me today. And when I do,
Same,
I keep the temperature
same.
between 135 and I don't really go above 140.
I heat mine up and then I take it down. That's exactly what I do. I don't set it too high. Like, I find when it's just at this moderate pace. Yeah, I don't do it a lot in the summer because I'm just like out in the heat and the sun, because I love the sun, I love the heat, I love swimming. But so I do it definitely much more like, you know, fall, winter, the beginnings of spring. It's been really rainy in LA, so I've been using it more lately. But yes, I keep it more moderate and warm and cozy,
It's
less of
really
a,
comfortable. It's not like this big stressful event. And there, you know, there's two types of sweat. You can get the water sweat, which is that like heart pounding, very high heat. Like to me, that's just too intense. But you will produce way more, you know, more liquid comes out. And then there's the fat sweat, which really is more of that like detoxy, you know, you're rendering, and this is like not technically correct, it's the way that I visualize it, but you're rendering your fat a little more slowly. It can release some of the stuff that gets stuck in the fat. And that feels like way more of the, you know, it's very lymphy, but it's that deep, but it's gentle and slow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what about supplements?
Oh, great question. So when it comes to supplements, so there's a couple things in my book. I do list a bunch of herbs and foods that are beneficial for the lymphatic system. But when it comes to supplements, I always say I am not an herbalist and I'm not trained to be an herbalist. So, and everybody is dealing with a different set of circumstances and a medical history. And I can't really, so I don't really prescribe or tell people what supplements to take. What I do, the one thing I do notice with supplements, I mean, there's like obviously, you know, a lot of people who need D and K and B and omegas, right? Like there's like a lot of basics. But one thing I do see, and this might be a Los Angeles thing, I do see some people tell people to take too many supplements. I've seen that. So I'm like, I don't want a whole pharmacy in your gut. You know, one of the things I love about the Moon Juice products is I love that you have so many of them available as a powder. You have some capsules, but I love the direct powder.